Thank you. Well, now is the chance for all of us to grill these guys and proceed with some questions. Let me explain how we'll do that. It's pretty straightforward. Simply come forward. We have a microphone in the center aisle there, so if you wish to address a question to the panel or to a particular individual on the panel, you can do that. Please, as you do that, the speakers list will maintain essentially a line in behind the person who's speaking. And because I anticipate lots of people wanting to ask questions, could you please ask your question and then take your seat and let them respond. So let's open it up for questions.
I have one question for the TRU folks. Given that you had university status but no new money, and you changed to university teaching workload, how did you manage that? Where did the money come from?
That's my question.
Thank you for that question. A lot of pressure to take on larger class sizes. And over the last 6 years, we've seen an increase in class sizes. In Jason's area, the faculty to student ratio has doubled, and from 1 to 10 to 1 to 20. So that's one of the ways that the institution has done this with no new money. That's certainly, but we have in other areas been creative in terms of vectoring. And the vectoring of classes, so the number of hours per week of contact hours. But it's definitely been, the budget squeeze is a definite feature of the last several years since university status.
The only other part that I might want to add there is we also have a large international program, both on campus and overseas, and so the university uses that to their advantage to generate revenue. So,
Actually, my question was answered. I had the same question as well.
I just have a question for the TRU folks again. I noticed you had a number of categories of people who were mentioned, those with degrees, those with masters, those with PhDs that were accepted. One category was left out. Those are the instructors that did not have any degrees. How did you deal, or how did you keep the trades and technology department in your university and not leave them behind?
One of the main priorities we had, and one of the principles, is that we wanted to maintain a strong trades component of our institution. And we made the point to our administrators, and they eventually agreed, that when you get a journey person's ticket, you are doing what every other academic instructor is doing, which is getting the terminal degree. It's just a matter of terminology and labeling. And the reality is that tradespeople are certainly equal, if not superior, in practical experience and training. So we felt very comfortable, and as I say, our administrators eventually agreed that even without a university degree, these members of our trades faculty would be fully valued and given the full salary and full promotion opportunities compared to anyone else on campus.
Can I just ask that when you speak right into the mic so we can all hear it?
My question is for both institutions, and you've been through a lot of effort and catharsis, it sounds like, in some cases. My question's objective: did all this effort and time and money result in either more graduates for the tax dollar or better qualified grads by some objective measure?
More graduates for the tax dollar. The answer to that is no, and that's kind of a complicated story in Alberta. And just going back to responding to lack of funding. So we developed degree programs and got into our students through to the second year, and there was a promise of something like $12 to $15 million for years 3 and 4 of the degrees. And then the Alberta government hit the wall in terms of money, and that money did not transpire. And we simply adjusted the number of students downward in the first year to cope with the students in years 3 and 4 on the principle that we weren't going to have unfunded students. So while our drive to become a university was very much to address the access problem in Calgary, where we turn away about 12 to 13,000 students every fall at all the institutions, that actually hasn't been an outcome. Are we graduating different, better qualified students by any objective measure? Yes, because we're graduating students with degrees, with baccalaureate degrees. And further to that, we've just developed a new academic plan where we're going to introduce learning outcomes and the assessment of outcomes in all programs. So once we've gone through that process, we'll be fairly confident, I think, of not only our students graduating with degrees, but they'll be graduating with a set of learning outcomes that we can assess. I also think another principle at Mount Royal is undergraduate student involvement and scholarship, and I think that's an ingredient of our degrees that will serve them very well when they head for graduate or professional school. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that we're graduating better qualified students.
One of the big shifts for me is around having more confidence in the post-tenure evaluation processes and career development processes and so on. So, and I know a number of people go through this experience, but I was involved in a hiring interview for a position last week and felt intimidated and felt quite strongly that against this candidate I would never have gotten the position I'm in now. And so my experience generally is the quality of intake of faculty has gone up significantly. And not that we had weak faculty previously, but the standards continue to improve, and Robin chairs the Institutional Tenure Committee, or the University Tenure Committee, and I know I hear from him over and over again about the quality of the candidates who are now teaching at Mount Royal. So I have to believe, just out of professional pride, that is a benefit to the students. And part of the recruitment strategy was around recognizing people's career work. So, we've talked about the Faculty Roles and Responsibilities Task Force, but we also co-chaired one on recruitment and retention, and this came back as a critical piece for us, that to attract the strongest candidates and have them stay at Mount Royal, then we were moving along the right road with this iteration of faculty rank.
I think the reality is that we've provided more opportunities for our faculty under our new provisions to access, for example, sabbatical leave. And because many of our bipartite, in fact, our sabbatical leave data shows that it's about equally split between bipartite and tripartite. So we have a lot of bipartite faculty who never had the opportunity previously to take 6 months or 12 months off and hone their pedagogical skills. So I think our students are definitely benefiting from that. And the offset, as I mentioned earlier, our class sizes have increased. We always prided ourselves as being a university or a university college with small class sizes. We've still got fairly small class sizes. So there are some trade-offs. But I think the question was more graduates per tax dollars. Well, our institution has grown in terms of student FTE numbers quite considerably over this period. So the question is, does that relate to rank and promotion? No, it just relates to our increased enrollment. So we are graduating more students, but I don't think there's a direct correlation between those two things.
I don't have anything to add to that.
My question is primarily for Mount Royal University. I actually had the privilege of teaching at Mount Royal more than a decade ago. And at the time, those growing pains that we're going through here now were happening there. And I recall that at the time there was a considerable number of tenured faculty who did not have the PhD. How were they accommodated or not in that process of becoming a university?
I think similarly to some of what we've heard about TRU, the institution recognized that there was a credential gap in a number of areas and put forward professional development funding, put forward various professional leave arrangements to support people who needed that terminal credential and so on. So, and probably a year or two after Robin arrived, he also created a vice presidency or an associate vice president around research. And that particular office has helped, I think, move the research agenda forward. It's helped people get individual grants in order to engage in that kind of additional educational training and so on. So we have, I think, a significantly higher complement of PhDs now as a result of those processes than we would have had 10 years ago.
Okay, I think this is a three-part question. Do your different streams have different titles? Can you move easily between the streams, or once you've elected to go one way or the other, you're stuck there? And on the equity question, is there an equity difference between those that are in the bipartite stream versus the tripartite stream? Do you find more a difference between who's electing to go in which stream?
Should we start? Can we start? Now I've got to remember all three. No, it's the same title. For us, it's the same title whichever stream you're in. There's no, I mean, we haven't really looked at it. There's no gender difference, I don't think, between the two streams, but I'm sorry I'm not going in the same order. And in terms of moving back and forth between the two streams, it's still voluntary for faculty members, so when they're appointed, they choose which stream they're in. And for us, it's called TS and TSS, Teaching and Service, or Teaching Scholarship and Service. Once you choose which stream you're in when you're appointed, you can't change it prior to tenure. But after tenure, you can change from one stream to another, but not more than every 3 years, I think, or there's some kind of regulation like that. But so it's fairly open, I would say, and still a matter of choice. But like I say, 75% of our faculty are on the TSS stream. That is the scholarly stream. Was that all three? Did I get all three? Okay. I wasn't going to say anything, but I think maybe I will jump in on that. In terms of defining principles and the concern in the Mount Royal community about the divisiveness of it, it's one of the reasons we settled on a common titling. And we looked at various iterations, and I think we've even looked at TRU's model. And we ultimately decided that if we were going to value the work equally, and if we were going to try and avoid people coming in anxious about this process and feeling that they were left behind, then we ought to move to a common title for it. So that, that was our decision based on our institutional culture, that it was a better fit to keep the one title at each rank.
So at TRU, we actually have two different sets of titles, one for the teaching stream. The titles there are lecturer, senior lecturer, and principal lecturer, and then for the research stream would be assistant, associate, and full professor. It's a very contentious issue at the university. We did a survey prior to bargaining in the last round because some people ranked that as very high on their list of things they want to change. Some people who are in the bipartite stream want to have access to the titles professor and associate professor, and they don't like being called principal lecturer or senior lecturer. But when we got the results of the survey, there were three choices that people could choose: either keep things as they were, change it to have both streams the same, and a third option to have a title such as teaching professor. The problem was the results of the survey were split about 30% for each. So as you can see, it's a very difficult thing. No matter what you do, it's going to be wrong in the eyes of some of your faculty. So the second question, is there movement between streams? Is it possible? Again, like Mount Royal, after you're tenured, there are provisions in the collective agreement to move between the streams. Moving from a bipartite stream to a tripartite stream is more difficult because you have to show a track record of scholarly activity and research that shows enough promise that you would be approved to switch to tripartite. And as I mentioned recently with some of the reviews that are happening of the tripartite people, they're actually being encouraged to switch to the bipartite stream, some of them. In terms of the question of equity, I don't have that answer. Does anyone else know? Sorry, I don't have that answer.
Hello, my name is Susan Morris, and I have a question about the instructional support faculty. Tom, you had referred specifically to that group, and I think something that really resonated for me was one of the core principles you talked about leave no one behind, or something to that effect. And I think there is a lot of anxiety here at Kwantlen. And I'll just back up a bit and let people know, because some people here may not know that among our faculty, with the non-instructional, or let me rephrase that, with the instructional support faculty, including counselors, librarians, learning strategists, learning specialists, and so on, there's quite a number of faculty in our area, and yet we are not in a faculty, big F faculty grouping. We're kind of in limbo, similar to the folks at UFE, the folks at, trying to think of where else, Vancouver Island University. And so we're not at the table when it comes to Senate. And there's big concerns as well around rank and advancement and how that's going to work out. So I'm hoping that reps from both schools could speak to that. Like, what is the experience and what's happened with your instructional support faculty? It sounds good to me, and I'd like to know more about it.
Thanks for that question, because this was one of our major concerns at not only the time of establishing principles, but when it came to responding to the Thompson Rivers University Act. Now, we are not under the Universities Act. We have our own legislative act, which specifies that there are 2 faculty elected from each capital F faculty or school. The problem, as you quite rightly pointed out, is that at our place, the library was not considered to be a faculty or a school. So our librarians have no representation on the Senate. That in itself is a problem because our discipline-specific standards for promotion and tenure have to be approved by the Senate as the academic governance body of the institution. So that's one of the challenges that we're working with our administration on. Our other instructional support faculty are in a faculty school, student development. It's our counselors, our co-op ed coordinators, our supplemental learning. All of those faculty are fully represented at Senate. The problem for us is developing discipline-specific standards for promotion for disciplines that generally don't have promotion across the university system. And this was a real concern for us. And we have, for example, an assessment center coordinator position. They assess students for a variety of reasons. This is a position that, doesn't have a real strong track record of promotion in other universities. The same with our coordinator for teaching and learning. So we've had some challenges in those areas, but certainly from the Faculty Association side, we're very aware that we need to have full representation and that we need to meet those needs.
Mount Royal, there are 3 groups, I guess, in that kind of area: the librarians, the counsellors, and the people who work in our academic development centre, which is the teaching support centre. They're all faculty members, so they're all part of the Faculty Association. The librarians are a large enough group that they have their own faculty council and therefore elect reps to GFC. The councillors, that was actually an interesting one. The councillors were, we took a while to figure that out. Anyway, most of them have either a psychology or a similar background, so they ended up joining the Faculty of Arts where the psychology department is, and so they are members of that faculty council. And the people who are in the teaching support area are they're part of the Faculty of Teaching and Learning, which is kind of a unique piece at Mount Royal, so they simply have their representation that way. All of those groups had processes for tenure. We're working through the process of, what are the criteria for promotion to the equivalent of full professor. We're still working on that.
Hi, I have two questions. The first one occurred to me when you were talking about equity amongst effort and so on from one faculty member to another. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to what kinds of systems you have in place for accountability for the research time as opposed to and as well as the service time. And the second one speaks to revenue. As we take instructors away from what could be perceived as a revenue generating position and being in the classroom. We've heard about some of the ways that's mitigated with larger class sizes and so on. But are there any other ways? Is any of this research generating any revenue either directly or indirectly?
Sorry, remind me of your first question.
Equity for service.
Right, thank you, yes. So we struggled a lot with that issue generally in the principles development at the beginning, and I think happily for us we then set it aside and left it to other groups to try and figure it out afterwards. But in general the process became that some broad criteria were established about performance expectations in these areas, and then the departments were asked to develop their own locally on the theory that they know best what the disciplinary standards are. And from there, those filtered up to a faculty level document, and from that, the goal was to filter them up to a committee of the GFC to make sure that there was at least some commonality and expectation across the university. I think that's always subject to some question and review, but for me, the honest truth is that some disciplines do have different expectations around what constitutes scholarship, for example. And if you take an area like social work where there's a fair amount of community involvement and working with community groups, they may value that quite highly, where an English department or a history department might be more focused on the publication record. So, I think we may revisit that over the long term, but my sense is people are generally satisfied that it's not easier to get tenure in one faculty than another currently, or easier to get promoted in one faculty than another. So I think that process of letting the discipline define it helped us make sure people are comfortable with the decisions they're making. And I think the last comment I'd make about that is we spent, I think, a fair amount of time cautioning people not to set the bars too high. That you can always adjust the bar higher later if you decide that that's appropriate, but bringing the bar down when it's unreasonable is messy, because now you've created a difference in standards and expectations among people already going through the process.
So I'll respond to the revenue question, I guess, as the administrator on the panel. It's an interesting one, and again, it was different for us than it has been, as I understand it, for the new universities in British Columbia. So. As Mount Royal went through this process, I think I would say there was a fair amount of internal support for the move to university, but the government was adamantly opposed to the idea until the last minute. And one of the reasons they were opposed is our president said, again, if it's university level programs, then it's university level funding. And one of the reasons why we needed university level funding is if you're going to take a large proportion of faculty and reduce the amount of teaching you do, then you have to hire in behind them to hire other faculty to take up that teaching power. So, starting about 5 years ago, and for 2 or 3 years, we hired about 136 new faculty members. So we filled in behind, and that was the principle of university level funding. On the question of research as a revenue generator, We're starting to see a little bit of that, but don't get into scholarship thinking it's going to solve the university's budget. I mean, there will be money will start to come, and there's overhead and all of that, and you get a little bit of money to start running your Office of Research Services, but it's not going to be a money maker, and nor should the primary objective of scholarship be to generate revenue. I would see that as a side benefit. If it works, fine, but don't count on it, at least in the early going.
One last point here. This has come up in passing, but I would say at Mount Royal, one of the financial differences is we have held the line on class size, but casualization and part-time is recognized, I think, by all parties as a significant problem for us, because that and the budget cuts recently haven't caused too much of a spike in it, but we have a much higher proportion of part-time faculty than I think anybody is comfortable with.
Right. Although that didn't change that's pretty much the same now as it was when we were a college for Mount Royal.
In terms of equitable implementation, let's say, of promotion, we have a number of institution-wide principles that we've developed. So we have the discipline-specific standards that are developed on the departmental level. And then we have the Senate, through its subcommittee on tenure and promotion, developed some institution-wide principles. And the two main features of the principles are that in order to be promoted, you have to show that you've maintained incremental growth since your last promotion or since your appointment, and also that your sphere of influence has to have increased. So that's sort of the overriding two principles, so that the sphere of influence could be found not just in peer-reviewed publication on the tripartite, but also through the way you've taken a leadership role in pedagogy, in curriculum development, in mentoring others through teaching. So there are many ways, many paths to reaching those goals. The one thing about, I would agree certainly with Robin that you don't go into scholarship to generate revenue, but one of the advantages of having faculty teaching, those who are involved with research, teaching at a 2+3 teaching load is the time they can spend in applying for Tri-Council grants and other external grants, and then when they're successful, the time they can spend on having undergraduates be involved with research at a very early stage of their careers. And that's been, I believe, one of the big successes at Thompson Rivers over the last decade, is the involvement of undergraduate students in meaningful research, publication. We've got a really strong track record, and that's where the university working conditions for those who are on tripartite appointments make that possible. So to go back to the other question about the quality of students who are being graduated, that's one factor. Our students tend to be have a step up over a number of other institutions that don't involve them with meaningful research.
And just on the first question about the equity and accountability for research and service time. So we do have, for the tenure track people who are applying for tenure, of course, there's a peer review process for the performance review, and so it's peer driven. So your colleagues would be looking at that and trying to evaluate you in an equitable manner. And then also for the application for tenure, we have the faculty level and Senate level committee looking at that. So your colleagues would be making a determination, and at least 2 faculty members from your discipline would be on the tenure committee, because in case your discipline is a little bit different than others in terms of measuring how much service or research you should do, that those people would be there to enlighten the rest of the committee members about that.
Hi, my name is Wayne Petruzik, and I'm from psychology. I have a couple of quick and dirty ones, I think. The first is, we've heard about the salary grid from Thompson River, but we haven't heard the salary grid except for the $30,000 non-merit pay from Mount Royal. Can you guys give me a quick and dirty, or give us a quick and dirty overview? What's the salary? What's the top of the scale, for example, at you guys' place?
the salary grid starts at around in the 60s, I think, for new appointments, or up into the 70s, maybe. Sorry, I'm a bit vague about it. We've now got 3 grids: assistant, associate, and full professor. The full professor grid, the associate professor grid ceiling is around 100,000. The full professor goes up into the 130s, I think. So there is a differential there.
I was just interested in the general range.
Right.
Because that factors in.
So our research shows that our range is pretty strong for initial faculty appointments, and in the kind of middle of Canadian universities, the further up the ranks you go.
Right. Okay, thank you. The second one is for the Thompson Rivers folks. So at the end, it sounds to me people went from a 4-and-4 teaching model to perhaps a 3-and-2 teaching model, but the number of students have doubled. And then on top of that, they end up with perhaps other sort of service or research duties as well. So again, one of those quick and dirty guesstimates, has workload increased?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to correct one thing you said. Those who were already on what we used to call scholarly activity positions were doing a 3+3 equivalent. So they simply went to a 3+2.
Right.
We made it very clear to our faculty back in 2003, 2004, that collegial governance involves a commitment of time and will increase the service component of what faculty do. There are multiple committees, both on the departmental and the faculty level. There are institutional committees, and the expectation was definitely increased.
Okay.
So the workload, now I wouldn't say that all of our class sizes have doubled. I know in my case, I teach in English, we've gone from about 24 up to 30, so it's not a doubling. In ESL is a little different. They want to crowd in as many international students as they can. But there's no doubt that our workload has increased. The payoff is that we have much more control over our professional lives.
And the payoff is also
faculty were willing to
you're making
take
about
them.
half as much again as we are as well. So
Yes,
okay.
that's- yeah.
So that's a good payoff. The last question that I have is in terms of Senate and Faculty Council. It sounds as though you folks essentially have the same Senate and Faculty Council structure as we do, which with probably a minority of faculty actually represented on those councils. Is that right? We were talking essentially the same, more majority or?
We actually have a majority of faculty members on Senate because for each of our faculties, large F faculty, we have 2 faculty representatives. I just wanted to go back though and correct something that Tom had said. Okay, I don't want to mislead anyone here. He said that the number of students in ESL has doubled, and he was referring to a TRU produced document that he just recently saw. That document, sometimes TRU wants to paint a picture, as do other institutions, I'm sure. It's not accurate. The student ratio has increased in those areas, but it has not doubled. It's probably the cap sizes used to be around 18, now they're up to 22. So it's not anywhere near doubled. That document was produced for a specific reason, and unless you knew about that, you would assume that the class size had doubled. So I just wanted to be fair to everyone about that.
Okay, so it hasn't doubled, but it has gone
No, not
up.
at all.
The last thing is, so you guys have a majority. What's your Senate and Faculty Council structure look like, faculty to administration / others ratio?
Yeah, that was, that ratio came out of the governance task force, which is really the first piece of all this work for us. And it's a substantial majority of faculty, which doesn't necessarily mean they can all get their oars pulling in the same direction. But it was set up that it's about a 2-to-1 ratio of faculty to all other positions on that, including administrators, students, and a board rep.
Thank you.
Thanks. The Senate question was going to be one of my questions, so that drops me off one. But one of the biggest differences from the Senate and from all of the stories you've told so far is the difference that all of the changes were community-driven at your institutions. Your institutions wanted to change. Your institutions wanted to become universities. Our Senate was mandated by the legislation. our faculty would never have agreed to an administrative heavy Senate. When we look at the changes that you've made, you both said from day one that the Faculty Association was involved in working out strategies to make this work. And at our institution, the Faculty Association has been excluded to the point that at our task force to discuss this, they're given an observer, non-speaking role at the table. I think that, and I'd like you to once again reiterate for the administrators in the room the importance of including the Faculty Association in getting any sort of change to be accepted by the membership. You both said that your membership brought forward the changes. That isn't the case at Kwantlen. At Kwantlen, we were told that now that you're a university, by government legislation, you'd better change this because that's what universities do. And so the whole atmosphere is very different. And so I'd also like you to address positive ways that if Kwantlen is going to make these kind of changes, that we could move in that direction.
Okay, I'm not going to comment on the Kwantlen situation. I'll tell you what happened at Mount Royal. It is important for the Faculty Association to be involved in, from our point of view, that was important because they are an important partner. But it was also important that all faculty be involved. So the Faculty Association had representation on all of these task forces, but there were lots of faculty on them, and we had those consultations that we talked about with all faculty. And the faculty member who stood up and said, I think we should have rank, actually at that point they might have been on the Faculty Association executive, or they were soon after. So it's partly about the Faculty Association, but it's also about involving all faculty from our point of view. I mean, it's true that the structure of your Senate, or in our case GFC, is mandated by the Act. So yes, if you're going to be a university, they kind of have to go with that. But our structure just happens to be under our legislation that it's two-thirds of GFC is elected out of the faculty councils, faculty members. It actually, and that brings you to another part of the transition at Mount Royal. I think it's been a little bit difficult actually for the faculty, and David can comment on this. So the Faculty Association actually has less, quote, power under the GFC model than they did under the Academic Council model. Because in Academic Council, they were 1/3 of the membership, but the membership was appointed by the Faculty Association. Under GFC, the faculty are 2/3 of the membership, but those faculty elected out of the faculty councils, so they're representatives of the faculty councils, not of the association. And that, you know, that was a change that required some discussion, shall I say. So it's an interesting one. It's Faculty Association, but it's also all faculty.
I feel like I could speak for 12 minutes on that particular problem, but a couple things I'd say about it. I left this out of some of our history, but maybe I'll add it for context. 2 or 3 years before we began this process, under the previous version of the Post-Secondary Learning Act, Mount Royal College was the only institution that had retained a right to strike. And we called a strike vote in the midst of some of the most bitter conflict between an association and a management. And you know, that particular agreement got settled, the strike didn't happen, the government came along and stripped right to strike out of our act. We're not a unionized environment. And then I came in as president, feeling like I had a particular role to try and pick up some of those pieces about the conflict that existed. And you know, Dave Marshall came in at the same time, and Robin was coming into his role at the same time. And I think collectively we knew that if we wanted the institution to move forward productively, we needed a better partnership. And one of the terms that Dave Marshall used right from the beginning at Mount Royal was tricameralism. That there are 3 bodies there. There's a board of governors, there's a faculty association, there's a GFC or a senate. And they each have separate responsibilities and separate voices. And you know, what I could go on and on about is when I began this process, and Robin can probably attest to some of this, but when I began this process as Faculty Association President, some of the worst conflicts of my career came from within the Faculty Association, who said, don't you dare talk about these issues as a community, they have to be bargained. And it was fighting out the boundaries, even within the faculty, of which voices could speak to the issue, and how you get a process that's respectful of all of those different roles. So I came out of the end of that, I was president for 5 years, I came out at the end of it thinking what we accomplished through those task forces was advancing the institutional conversations in positive directions where people didn't have agendas, and then you can pass those recommendations to the board and to the Faculty Association bargaining team, who frankly are supposed to have agendas. And it was that process, I think, that led to our success, is being able to have a long enough neutral conversation before it had to be decided at the table.
Our situation, of course, at TRU is we are a unionized environment, in a unionized environment, and we don't make the distinction between faculty and faculty association. We tend to see the Faculty Association as not just the bargaining agent of our members, but the vehicle through which our members can exert pressure and can meet their needs with administration. And maybe that's because we're in a unionized environment. We decided early on that everything would be based on bargaining, that there would be no process separate from the meeting at the bargaining table and enshrining everything in the collective agreement. That was really important for our members, and they made it clear to us when I served as president that that would be the only way they would accept these moves forward. You talked about interest-based bargaining, and that's something that we've had no experience. Well, I shouldn't say that. We did have some experience with that in the 1970s, and it was such a disaster that our members made it clear that we weren't going there. So the adversarial relationship, though, at the bargaining table does not mean that you're not involved in a partnership between administration and faculty. And actually, our bargaining, I've mentioned that several times, we were in the perfect positive storm. We lucked out. We had a government that was willing to put money on the table to increase our salary. We had a government that was willing to put money into a bonus if we were forced to reach an agreement by March 31, 2006, which we discovered more pressure on the administration than on the faculty. And we were very fortunate that the conditions under which we were working in a partnership led to, I think, great mutual gains. So certainly the situation is different today, and I think we all recognize that there's a very different context in which Kwantlen is struggling with these issues. The only aspect of this that we had no control over, of course, was the legislative act, and that gave us a Senate with a very slim faculty majority. Our faculty councils are 99% faculty. The dean is there, but if we have all of our faculty showing up, for example, in arts, we'll have 120 faculty members and one dean. So we have a great deal of control over that level of governance.
I don't have a lot to add, but I would like to reiterate what Tom said, is that all the provisions of our tenure and promotion process were bargained by the Faculty Association. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is your Faculty Association is a professional association. They are part of a provincial federation where they meet with their colleagues and learn about experiences at other institutions across the province and even sometimes across Canada. And so they have a lot of expertise in dealing with these matters. And it's probably very wise to include them in the consultation process moving forward so that everyone can achieve what they want to achieve as you move forward with this. Thanks.
So just interjecting here, we're running a little short of time, and we still got a nice line of folks that want to ask questions. So a couple possibilities here. We're going to be moving on at 3:15 for a little reception for these guys, so I think we could possibly go to 3:15 panel. Would you be willing to take questions? Okay. Video team, are we okay to go for a little longer? Okay, great. So we'll go till 3:15, but to move things along, maybe the questions could be addressed to perhaps just one of the panelists or one response, and perhaps that way we can move through the group. So we'll have to cut it at 3:15. If you have to leave at 3, totally understand, but let's try to go a little further.
Hi, Bob Crockett from marketing, and I guess I'm worried about the hardening of the faculties. I think it's more of an observation, and you may not even have to respond. But every time I hear if Kwantlen's going to be successful, we have to be relevant, credible, and compelling to the students and the communities we're dealing with in an internet world. I just worry about research in a world where publishing can be done anywhere. I worry about being able to be flexible and pull in the horticulture groups and get cross promotion going in the university. And what I see with all of this process is more committees with senates and less flexibility with instructors, so that we can't have the cross pollination, which I think is what education needs to do these days. So I guess I just want to express a real concern that what we're doing is just adding more fat to the arteries, and we're going to become an old, slow university, just like SFU and UBC, who can't. And it's bad enough to change anything at this place, and our secret is to be able to be mobile and more flexible. This process seems to just be dragging me down. It's my first and only meeting I'm going to do to this thing, because it was driving me crazy. But I appreciate your.
Hey, well, David was going to respond, but I spent 20 years at SFU, and I think it's a pretty good institution, even still. I think it doesn't have to happen. I think you can. I mean, we are trying to be universities with a difference, not old, cranky old universities like maybe the U of T. Sorry, U of T graduates. I think you can do it. It's a real concern, and it's a good one to raise, but I think you can maintain the flexibility and the innovation through all of this, if you're determined to do it.
And just very briefly, but in some of our principles documents that came out of a research task force, we agreed to define scholarship as broadly as possible and to define peer review as broadly as possible, so you've got that ability to move laterally.
Doug Weed, Trades and Technology. You mentioned that the trades instructors at TRU were treated the same, so they were allowed to move to full professorships?
Not quite yet. Their standards for tenure and promotion have been approved as of 2 months ago. It was a long process. As I mentioned, there aren't a lot of models out there for university trades promotions. So, but they have the full right to move to the next rank. All of our trades faculty are in bipartite positions. No one is in a research position, but the anticipation is that we will eventually see trades faculty with research programs. Absolutely. 125,000, but it'll take them, I think it'll take them a newly hired tenure track trades faculty member. It will take, I have the figures, just so you know, it'll take between 25 and 30 years to reach the top of the scale.
Just one more quick thing I want to add to that. The trades faculty are actually very excited. The trades faculty are actually quite excited about the tenure and promotion process because, like every other faculty, they're supposed to demonstrate an expanding sphere. I'm trying to answer your question as well. And that, for example, right now, our trades faculty have a project down in Mexico. So they're very excited about this because in order to be promoted, they have to have national and some international projects on the go. So it's quite exciting for them to think about doing these projects, and it's not so bad to go down to Mexico in the winter to work on them either. So trades do have an opportunity to gain from this as well.
Hi, Betty Cunnin from Horticulture. If I have to address this to somebody, Robin, it's going to be you as the administrator. At Kwantlen, we don't only find ourselves in the unusual circumstances of still being funded as a college, even though we're a university, we also have explicit language in the University Act that limits research from time to time as resources are allowed. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on either the efficacy, the legitimacy about establishing a research level faculty under that explicitly limiting legislation that we have.
Well, the financial side's a challenge and a problem. There's no question about that. On legislation or regulations limiting research, we have that in Alberta. So the CARI institutions, what is it? Comprehensive Academic Research Institutions, the university, do all kinds of research, and McEwen and us are supposed to be confined to more to applied research. Our answer to that is you can't control what faculty members do when it comes to research, so forget those kinds of distinctions, basically.
Thank you.
Wade Deisman from Criminology. I wanted to thank the panelists for sharing their principles with us. We haven't had principles to guide us in this process, and I think the impact has been one of creating a kind of profound sense of kind of existential insecurity where people didn't really know who else in the room was coming from the same position as they were and who they ought to be afraid of. So I'm hoping that that we can look at your principles and see which ones we could actually cobble into something that would be useful for us. My question is about culture, and actually what I want to do is speak to a fear that's not my own, but it's one that I think is terribly important and I haven't heard expressed here. One of the remarkable and I think quite admirable things about Kwantlen is that it's maintained a certain sense of flatness or horizontality. There isn't a kind of status hierarchy here like there is at other institutions. I came here from the University of Ottawa, where the obsession with pomp and title and rank has reached pathological proportions. Partially, I think, as a way of bridging the two solitudes. They just rely on that as the kind of measure to distinguish between themselves. And what's refreshing about Kwantlen is that it doesn't suffer from a lot of that. And I think what a lot of people really worry about is that we're going to be losing something that is terribly, terribly valuable if we allow some sort of system of distinction to enter in. I think everybody understands that there might be benefits, but from the perception of many, the shortcomings may be more severe. And of course, we all are familiar with the stories of people who get hired into tenure-track positions and then are told to hunker down, keep their heads down, and just power through until you get tenure. Don't worry about those controversies that are brewing at Senate or faculty council or with the KFA or any of those other kinds of things. Just focus on, don't take risks and speak out, just focus on getting the tenure. And of course, the punchline is by the time they get the tenure, they've forgotten some of those values and principles. So I'm wondering if you have seen these effects of status hierarchies and pecking orders and that kind of inducement to kind of remaining silent. I'm wondering if you've seen those negative things, and if you have, whether you've taken measures to counteract them. Thank you.
I was hired at the then University College of the Cariboo just after the first wave of degree granting had started, autonomous degree granting, when we cut our apron ties from UBC and SFU. We already had a hierarchy. We had people hired in 1989 to about 2002 into scholarly activity positions. So it wasn't as if we had a flat horizontal structure. We already had a distinction between those who, because of their terminal degrees, were given the right to teach upper level degree courses, and those who were kept at the first and second year level because they didn't have the terminal degree. What we've done in terms of moving to rank and promotion is to give everyone the opportunity to achieve the kind of validation that I think they were lacking up until 2006. Those who were teaching at first and second year level with master's degrees, I think, felt inferior. They felt that they were not being valued by the institution or by their colleagues. And I think now we're starting to see, it's not a fait accompli by any means, but we're starting to see senior lecturers, that is bipartites who are promoted, feeling finally my contribution to this institution is being recognized.
Thank you. Hi, I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself earlier. I'm Ed Mix from Trades and Technology. And just a little bit of clarification on things. I know we've had a lot of carrots dangled in front of us with this rank advancement scheme that we've got going here. Can you be specific as to, from Trades and Technology, how many instructors and what level they were hired at? And how many have made it to the top and for how long? This is something that worries me because I see this culture of rank and status. We in the Trades Technology Department here have felt like we've been left behind for a number of years. And because of different things that happen at the university, this is things that we point to as proof. So we just want a little bit of reassurance that this kind of culture is not going to pervade the system and that we are not left behind as Trades and Technology. I know everybody has the opportunity, but how many have actually made it? It's like me being a second-class citizen in my own country.
Thanks, that's an excellent question. I'll try to do my best to answer it. But as I tried to indicate earlier, our trades faculty at this point are very excited about the opportunities for tenure and promotion. They were very nervous about it previously. They didn't quite understand how it was going to work for them. When you think about it, how many trades professors do you know out there? So what they've done at our institution is there's been a lot of dialogue, and the Faculty Association has worked closely with them to help them, to give them ideas about what type of portfolio they would have. They're not necessarily going to have peer-reviewed publications, but they might have projects, hands-on projects that they're working at, that they include photographs or videotapes of that and include it into their portfolio. And so in terms of the specific numbers, the trades faculty just recently had their tenure and promotion standards documents passed at Senate within the last year. So they're just starting now to make their first applications. And I believe there was at least half a dozen of the trades faculty who put in their applications for promotion. So it's quite an exciting time for them. I hope I answered your question.
At what level were they hired in at?
Well, they were all hired in, just like everyone else, at essentially the lowest level of teaching, and then instructor at that time. And now, if they're in the bipartite stream, they might be applying for the senior lecturer position.
Thank you.
Hi, Larissa Petrillo in anthropology. It seems to be the way it's done, but I find the idea of streams just very limiting. That, say, my community work leads to my research, which leads to my teaching, and so on and so forth, and everything in between. And so this idea of, say, for example, sphere of influence, sounds sort of sci-fi-ish, but this idea of sphere of influence really interests me because it seems to cross all of those streams. And so I'm just wondering if any of you had examples of that thinking outside of the box, kind of revolutionary idea, some examples of that kind of thinking that you've put into action.
I was thinking around the previous trades question about some of these issues. In keeping with the general principle of defining scholarship as broadly as possible, we also tried to define service as broadly as possible. So community activities that come out of your professional expertise can be credited towards your accomplishments at Mount Royal. And in building those into the criteria, I think that was a huge step forward for the people who were anxious that in their particular professional areas there wouldn't be recognition of what they were doing. I think about childcare and early childhood education or social work at Mount Royal. Those were areas that weren't quite sure how they'd fit into this academic rank thing that seemed to serve the arts and science faculty better. But we did cast it as broadly as possible.
Jane Hobson from biology. I have a question for TRU, either one of you. And it relates back to the original principles and then to something you said at the end. What I heard you say was that people in Access, quite possibly now, have 11 courses with higher student to faculty ratio in order to fund the $30,000 difference in salary. And I wondered, that to me is not going to help a culture of equanimity or no resentment. And I wondered if you would be able to recommend a principle that would say, no, this can't happen, like you can't take from Peter to give to Paul or something. And I wondered if you had any recommendations as founding principles of this whole process that would eliminate that.
What I can say is that you have to bargain better. Our workload provisions, as Jason pointed out, were not as ironclad as we had hoped. And now administration, because they're being squeezed financially, and it's not so much to fund future promotion salary increases, it's to face a 1.5% reduction in core government funding that we're all facing, every institution across the province. So I don't think it's really tied directly to the promotion salary increases. I think it's more the operational shortfall that we're seeing right now. But certainly we're fighting this as a faculty association. We're fighting against this move back to an 11-course workload. We don't think, that's fair. We made an honest effort to meet what we felt was our part of the commitment, which was to create an academic environment for all of our programs, especially those in university preparation and English as a second language. So I don't think it's fair to associate the promotion directly with this particular workload issue.
How about just the increase in salaries? Yeah, it's just the salaries.
In 2006, we negotiated, of course, we weren't in a zero mandate bargaining context, so those downstream costs associated with promotion were part of that 2006 bargaining. Now, we did not raise the salary issue at bargaining in 2010. We knew there was a zero mandate. It was our administration that dangled the magic $125,000 figure in front of us. And it came somewhat as a surprise to us, but they had other reasons. We created a law school at TRU, and as you know, law professors tend to earn a lot more than us mere mortals. So they had to find a way to pay law professors at a higher rate without jeopardizing the salary scale. So they increased the top.
Just a little bit I'll add into that. I know we're probably running out of time here, but I think TRU is also a little bit different than the situation here in the sense that TRU wants to become one of the big research universities. I'm not sure if that's the direction Kwantlen is heading, but I just wanted to add something in there in terms of the adult basic education, UPrep, ESL. Yes, at our institution we're having some major problems there. I think our administration doesn't see those as fitting into the type of big research institution. I was paid a visit by our student union executive director recently, who told me that in the discussions that they've had with administration at TRU, they've been told that we don't really need the adult basic education. We should follow a model similar to UBC, and the same with our ESL, that rather than being a faculty position, it should be through the continuing education department. So again, I'm not trying to rain on anyone's parade, I'm just trying to tell you what the reality is in our institution. It's probably a little bit different than here. I don't think you're trying to become one of the big research institutes, so I don't know if that's an issue or not.
Well, I'm sure we could keep going, but we do need to wrap it up. So would you please, first of all, just join me in thanking the panel for coming. As you've probably noticed, we've been videotaping this whole session, and we will make it available as soon as we can, most likely through the task force's SharePoint site. So let your colleagues know that it's something that they can take in as well. So thank you so much for coming to our session. We really appreciate it.